Hey friends, Jeff here with a new episode of Conversations Life Science Leaders Aren't Having. Today we welcome to the show Dr. Jesse Hall. Jesse is currently Chief Medical Officer at AltraBio, where they are developing novel therapies to improve the lives of patients who are living with autoimmune diseases. Jesse got his start practicing medicine and realized that that really wasn't his calling, and found his way into drug development, where he has moved from a medical affairs role being an individual contributor to where he finds himself today leading a team as Chief Medical Officer. We dive into Jesse's journey, the leaders that inspired him, the realities of being at a small biotech, and we uncover what I believe is the most powerful phrase that a leader can speak to another person. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Dr. Jesse Hall. Dr. Jesse Hall, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you as a guest today.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. You just heard me do a brief introduction of you and who you are to me. I would love for you to start us off and let the audience know what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, so we had a busy morning this morning, and I guess a busy week, busy month, several months for that matter. We're in the process of raising a Series B round for our company. So it seems like we're always in that process of raising a next round, or at least speaking with investors.
And what are you most excited about right now with AltraBio?
Yeah, so I guess what I'm most excited right now is really we're kind of on the cutting edge of immunology research right now. And a lot of companies, including big companies, are moving in the area that this company has been in for several years, which is looking at checkpoint agonists and looking how checkpoint agonists can be exploited for the treatment of autoimmune disease. They've been explored on the immuno-oncology side for a number of years and been quite successful, but I think we're just starting to see the initial days of checkpoint agonists in autoimmune disease.
And what about all that work? What most gets you excited when you wake up every morning? Like, maybe there's a feeling, I get to do this. I don't have to do it. I get to do it.
Yeah, so I guess what's cool for me on a daily basis and on a weekly basis is we are in the process of running our first in human study for our second generation compound. And there's a new piece of data that's coming out typically daily, where we're seeing some component of how the drug is performing, whether it's receptor occupancy, whether it's PK, whether it's the safety profile, whether it's a PD outcome. And it trickles in, and it's trickling in such a fashion where we're starting to build the story. So each day we're putting another piece of the puzzle together, and that's really cool for me. It's not often that you get to take a drug into a first in human study, especially with the novel mechanism. And so not only are we learning about the drug, but we're learning about the mechanism. And it's exciting days for us right now.
I almost have this picture. I don't know why I get weird images in my mind, but like you're on the other end of this great exploration, and you're getting these updates from, I mean, granted it's a little bit more than this for you, but you're getting these updates and you just are on the edge of your seat of every little insight, every little message, maybe in the olden times, telegrams, or however they were, but that you're on your edge. I just have the sense that you and your team are on the edge of your seat of what's going to come next.
Yeah, no, and I have to say, so not only is it cool, not only is it interesting from a scientific perspective, but really every piece of data could potentially determine the future of our company effectively. So there's difference in working in early clinical research in a large pharma company, right? Because at the end of the day, you get a bad piece of data, or you get something that's not consistent with what you thought, and the product fails, or the mechanism fails, and you move on to the next product. But in an early development position in a small biotech company, each piece of data could determine whether you're a company this week or next week. So yeah, it's exciting. It's also very frightening. It's a different component of I guess research. But at the end of the day, being on that cutting edge, that's really what is going to drive the science forward, right? We're not in a safe space. We're literally on the cutting edge every day.
Hmm. Are you a cutting edge person outside of work? Is that something you're hungry for, or that you seek out, like to be a little bit on the edge? Is that part of your story?
Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't say so. Like from a personality perspective, I think I'm fairly conservative. I like conservative things. Um, But what really attracts me, I guess, to biotech is not so much being on the edge and being in that frightening position like you're jumping out of a plane without a parachute. But it's more from the perspective of having the freedom to be able to explore these questions on a daily basis. I think that's what I like about biotech. It's more about freedom than it's about that living on the edge component. Now, you kind of have to accept the living on the edge and the risks that are associated with that to get the other thrill, I guess. But yeah, no, it's definitely different working in a small biotech company than a large company.
Mm. Yeah, for me, what I'm learning about myself is I think we all in some way have an adventurous heart, and it's expressed in lots of different ways. Sometimes it is the jumping out of the plane or whatever thrilling thing. And sometimes it's being right there in the context that you're describing at AltraBio. So it just sounds like it's feeding a part of you, feeding that adventurous part of you.
It must. And it may be it's feeding my kind of desire for freedom and flexibility, and you just take that risk that's inherent in being able to achieve that.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of going to your heart, to your personal side, to the non-work side. I'd love to just spend a little bit more time there. We get asked all the time, what do you do? Networking, events, what conferences, what do you do? And I even asked you, what are you up to in the world? I'd love to just take a different angle at exploring who you are and ask, what do you love? Like what really speaks to your heart? What do you love?
Yeah. And so I have to say what I really get the enjoyment out of on a daily basis, and it's going to sound cliche, but I really enjoy working with my colleagues and looking at this data that's emerging from a clinical study and trying to wrap our heads around it and say, everyone here in this small team brings a certain specialty, a certain background, a certain knowledge to the situation, and being able to have all of those perspectives, looking at data as it's emerging and just working together as a team. I mean, that's really the exciting part. Because we have a very small team, but everyone has a very diverse background, and we're able to solve a lot of problems very quickly just based on the diversity of that knowledge. So I think that's what drives me, is seeing that new piece of information and then watching how our team processes it.
How about outside of work? What do you love?
Yeah. So what do I love? I honestly do like just spending time with my family. So, when I get an opportune moment to, pick up my daughter early from work and go to the park, kick the ball around, those are really the components that I do relish. And I had a unique opportunity. So when we closed Ardea back in 2017, 2018, there was a moment of time where it was clear that I was going to have an extended run there from the perspective of closing down the company, but also recognizing that I was going to have additional time. And I had a colleague who was from AstraZeneca Japan, and he was really working from the perspective of trying to identify how medically being in the moment can impact your life and impact your health. So I had the time. I ended up taking a course on just being aware at UCSD. And it was a great course. And, it's not something that I practice on a daily basis, but when I get in those moments, for example, when I'm at the soccer field with my daughter kicking the ball around, I do try and take the moment to reflect and just say, this is what life is about. It's not about anything else. It's just being in the moment at that time and trying to enjoy it.
I remember a moment or an evening when my wife had something to do and I had to be full on dad duty and was just powering through the stuff, homework, dinner, chores, just like, feeling so good. And then had a moment to stop after they were in bed, they were smaller. And I stopped and I was like, I don't remember much about this evening.
Yeah.
So what you're saying really, really rings true, just resonates, like the power of presence, the power of awareness of the moment. That's such a gift.
And I have to say, I don't know if it was that experience where I went through and trained to be able to recognize the moment, or whether it's, it just kind of happens naturally. But I do try and do a better job of being in the moment, being present, especially in those important times, as opposed to your mind thinking about what do you need to do tomorrow or what stressed you out during the day. Is just really settle and try and enjoy where you are.
And how do you bring that into your world? I mean, biotech, early stage. I mean, you gave us a little taste, description of all the things that are up to in this industry. It's always about what's next. It's always about that next piece of data. It's always about that next, you celebrate for a minute when you get that round of investing, and then it's about, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to come through? How do you stay present? How do you leverage what you learned in that course and what you're practicing at home? How do you leverage that in such a pressure cooker like the biotech space?
Yeah, it really is hard. And I have to say, there's a recent experience that we had, which was 2022. Effectively, we spent the year working through our IND enabling process, and then we filed our IND. And at the end of that filing, it was like we had our IND clearance, and it's like we should be celebrating this, but instead we were worried about, okay, what's the next step? When are we going to get this first in human study started? What are we going to do from a financing perspective? And oftentimes I have to tell my team, and I have to tell myself, which is, hey guys, let's celebrate these moments, because I think it's critical to celebrate success before moving on to the next thing. And maybe that training, maybe that experience with that program that I was involved in helped me to do that. But it's a challenge on a daily basis. Oftentimes I'll be worried about the next piece of data that's going to read out, and I'll be stressed. What is it going to say? But oftentimes at the end of the night, I'll be just talking to my wife, and I'll say, you know what, it is pretty cool that we're taking a drug into humans that we don't fully understand and we're learning about all the time. So yeah, it's a struggle, but I think you do need to do that.
Yeah, I love just that picture of the reflection of like, wow, look at what I get to do and look at what we're up to. I had a similar experience. We went to Hawaii for vacation last year, and we were busy. And there was a moment when I just had I just looked around. I was like, look what we get to do. Yeah, the details are cool and fun, and et cetera, et cetera. But I love this moment that you just described, of describing it to your wife, like almost like a kid, like, oh my gosh, look what we get to do.
Absolutely. And I guess we do need to appreciate that, and sometimes just set aside kind of the stressors that are associated with what we're doing, and just say, we're very lucky. We're very lucky to be able to do this. And at the end of the day, occasionally I'll kind of get this little twinkle that says, wow, if this really comes through the other side, we could be helping a lot of patients. And to be in a very small biotech company, really on a daily basis, you're impacting what that product could look like. And I've worked on a bunch of, interesting, cool products in my time. But to be involved in it at this stage and to be able to influence it to this degree, I think I'm very fortunate. I think my team is fortunate.
Hmm. You've been on both sides, the much larger and now the very small.
Yeah.
Do you feel closer to the patient in the very small, or did you feel closer to the patient in the larger? How has your orientation to the patient changed over your career?
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when you're a big pharma company, oftentimes you get into these this mantra, this cliche of saying that it's all about the patient, but oftentimes I think the patient gets lost in that environment. You can speak to it, but when you're really looking at, for example, lab values from a very small clinical study, and almost knowing these patients by their lab values, I feel like I'm closer now to the patient than I have been in many components of my career. So I think it's very, it's very refreshing to be working in a small company and to be on that edge, but being on that edge, knowing that you could potentially be making a significant breakthrough.
Hmm. Huh. I think we could probably put everything we've talked about so far under the heading of conversations leaders aren't having. But let's just be explicit and name that, conversations life science leaders aren't having. In addition to everything we've been talking about, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What are those conversations that life science leaders aren't having or need to be having more?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thinking about conversations that we need to be having or we should be having more often. And I think a lot of these conversations are maybe happening, or they're happening in leaders' heads. But I think we need to just be more explicit. And I think one of those topics is how do we maximize efficiency? Yeah, I think we're going through a stage probably in biotech that potentially hasn't been seen in some time. I think generally most investors, most leaders in biotech will describe this as a relative downturn in biotech. If you look at the investments that are being made, it's certainly less. And maybe that's just relative to the frantic investment that was occurring in 2021. But I think there's a lot of companies now that need to look at themselves in the mirror, look at their pipelines, look at their people, and say, are we utilizing our resources most efficiently? And I don't know what biotech is going to look like over the next 12 to 18 months. But every sign that I'm seeing is that we need to be more efficient. And I think that's somewhat of a short vision, which is we need to be more efficient for our companies and for us to survive this relative downturn. But also, I think we need to look and say, how can we be more efficient to serve the patients? And some of those things are, how can we develop drugs more efficiently? And some of those components are, for example, how can we select patients for our clinical trials that have a greater potential for success with our treatments? Because you decrease the size of a clinical trial, you decrease the time, the duration to market, you also decrease the cost. And oftentimes, I think in our industry, we have to point to development costs, which are driving the prices of these therapies. But continuing to spend at the rates that we could potentially be spending is really not sustainable. And the only way that we can impact that is not to say we're just going to shut down innovation and we're not going to develop drugs for patients that need them. I think we just need to be more efficient in our approach of developing these drugs so that we can get them to patients more quickly and hopefully more cost effectively.
One of the first things you said when you put forward this idea was your sense is that these conversations are happening in leaders' heads. but maybe not as explicit. What is the, like, if you went into work tomorrow or went into another company in an advisory role around efficiency, what is the specific, what is one, there's probably many around efficiency, lots of different ways, but what's that first conversation, and with whom are you having that conversation to challenge them to be more efficient with their resources?
It's a challenge, right? Because when you do a big fundraising, it feels like you have the money to invest, and oftentimes the first reflex is to start adding components to your team that you feel you need. At AltraBio, I think we've been very disciplined, at least since I've been here over the last 18 months, in looking at a need, a resource, and as opposed to saying, let's bring that resource in full time, looking to how can we serve that need through another mechanism. And oftentimes that's from a contracting perspective. Oftentimes that's working with vendors that would be able to provide what you need over a short period of time. But then when you're finished with that need, you're able to move on to the next need that you potentially could have. And I think you're going to see, unfortunately, in our industry, a turn away from having very large internal teams to having to find that resource externally. And I think that's just what we're going to see over the next 12 to 18 months.
It almost feels like there's an invitation, Jesse, that when the funding comes in, the invitation is, yeah, we're going to celebrate, to your point from before, we're going to celebrate, but we're going to keep acting as if we don't have it. It feels like, you didn't say that, but it feels like there's almost an invitation to say, okay, you got it, it's there, but let's act as if we don't have it.
Yeah, and that may be a really a shift in the mindset. And I think you are going to see biotech change over the next several years based on what we're seeing. I think oftentimes you see pendulum swing. So, for example, when I first started working in clinical research on the biotech side, I was at Amgen, and most of the things that we were doing were being done by individuals who were Amgen employees. By the time I left Amgen, most of that work was being outsourced. And, I think pendulums do swing in each direction, but the pendulum may be swinging again for at least small biotech to be smaller, more nimble, and effectively more cost conscious.
Well, I probably should have asked you when you first introduced this term efficiency. Again, that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What would you say is the definition of efficient?
And that's why I wanted to talk about it in the short term and the long term. So short term efficient is yeah, let's look at a need that we have. Is that something that we need to serve with an internal resource, or is that something that we can serve externally? Now, from an efficiency long term, though, I think that the challenge that we have as industry leaders is to be able to better identify patients that either could be better responders to the therapy or could tolerate the drug better. And I think this idea of personalized medicine has been kicked around since I've been in industry. But it was almost sacrosanct for you to mention that we're going to develop a personalized therapy at a large pharma company 15 or 20 years ago, because that was viewed as, you're going to potentially reduce my market size, right? But at the end of the day, we're not serving patients by approaching them all in a shotgun approach. I mean, I think most diseases that we end up treating are really pretty heterogeneous, where some of the symptoms may be similar, but oftentimes the underlying cause of the disease is very heterogeneous. And I think we need to better identify patients to identify appropriate therapies. So I see efficiency being short-term as well as long-term. I think all of us need to be more efficient.
It almost feels like that from what you're describing, that could be a core value, like to always be thinking, how can we do this in the most efficient way possible? It feels like that has to be part of the ethos of the organization. It can't be just this this random thought, as you kind of referred to before, oh, it would be nice to be efficient, or let's try to be efficient. It feels like it's important that idea is part of the ethos of the organization.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think you're gonna see that happening. I think we're seeing it for example, on the tech side. I've never worked in tech, but I read the headlines on a daily basis, and it seems like a lot of those tech companies hired people, and people were walking around the organization working to find things to work on. And that's not the right approach. And I don't think we're going to be in an economic environment where that's going to even be feasible.
I'd like to change directions just ever so slightly, and your story of ending up where you are. I mean, you started on the clinical side of medicine as an MD, and now you find yourself as a leader in a biotech, and leaders in other organizations. I'm wondering, as you reflect on that journey from being right there with the patient on the clinical side to now being where you sit in a leadership role, what has shaped you the most in making that journey from science or medicine, the practical application of it, to leading in the way that you are?
Yeah, it's a great question, and where I ended up, I have to say, in retrospect, I'm not surprised. So I guess maybe my background's a little bit different, or maybe it's similar to a lot of other physicians. So the reason I went into medicine is my mom. She was a physician. I had two older siblings, and older siblings meaning they were 7-8 years older than I. So I saw them go through the process. Both of them are physicians, and they're still practicing physicians. But from the beginning, I have to say, I was always interested more in doing something from a business perspective. But I didn't know how that was going to manifest itself. But even to the extent that when I was an undergraduate, I didn't major in the typical, biology or chemistry. My key interest was economics, and so I got a minor in economics. And effectively, when I was going through college, university, what I was focusing on was just getting those prerequisites done so I could go to medical school, because I knew it was inevitable. That was what my family wanted me to do. And my mom even said, as I was going through the process, she said, you don't have to be a physician. And I don't know what she meant at the time. I do know now, but she said, just go to medical school because it's going to teach you how to think. And I wasn't sure what she meant by that at the time, but I just trusted that she was right. And I went through the process. I enjoyed the academic components of medical school, but kind of the daily grind of seeing patients, just having that same, getting up in the morning, having that same routine was not appealing to me. I always enjoyed the interaction with the patient, and there's nothing better than being able to help someone and just getting that gratification. And I think maybe to some extent I get that gratification now working in clinical studies, especially smaller clinical studies. But honestly, as physicians or as medical students, you are never exposed to other opportunities that you can potentially pursue with a medical degree. Now, I see some of our investors and many of our investors who, some of them just went to medical school and then they started working at banks. I'm just amazed that they were so introspective and understood that that's what they wanted to do and move quickly into it. I went a different path. I went into, let's say, I'm going to go do a traditional residency, not understanding what opportunities were available to me. But eventually, just by talking to people and saying, what should I do next? What do I want to do? I was exposed to the fact that there are physicians that work in pharmaceutical and in the biotech arena. And fortunately, I found it. I'm very fortunate, and I feel like I found exactly what I was meant to be doing. I think there's some physicians that get into industry later in their careers, meaning that they go through either an academic path or they're in practice for a significant number of years. that was a different path for me. And I'm glad I did, because I got into industry so early, I've been able to be exposed to it to a number of different capacities. So I started actually in medical affairs. And so I've worked my way back from medical affairs into, first in human preclinical work, and getting to see that entire journey. I think I was able to do that because I started early.
You described just the words you use. This is what I'm made to do. Do you remember the moment or moments, maybe one moment where you were like, oh, this is what I'm made to do. This is what I'm supposed to be doing with my training and with who I'm wired to be as a person.
Yeah, I don't think it was a specific moment. I think it's an evolution, and it's being able to reflect back retrospectively on the different steps that you've taken and where you are now. And I can't say I'm very happy being where I am, working on what I'm working on, getting the opportunity to potentially develop a novel mechanism that could be helping patients. It wasn't a moment in time. It's really just in retrospect.
And as you described your first place in this world in medical affairs, what, as you reflect now in your journey, now you sit as CMO at AltraBio, what has shaped you the most in terms of how you lead people?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think what has shaped me most is being around leaders that I wanted to aspire to be. And maybe one of those leaders came from Ardea, my experience at Ardea. So, effectively when I was at my role at Abbott in medical affairs, and then was in my development role, when I was at Amgen, I wasn't leading people. Effectively, I was one of the components of the team. I was an individual contributor. I didn't really get the opportunity to lead people, to lead a team until I came to Ardea. And fortunately, at Ardea, we had what I envisioned is the ultimate leader in our industry, and that's James Mackay. I think he was on this program previously, but the way he leads is really, he leads with his heart, but he also leads with his head. And I've described him as the best leader that I've ever worked with in industry, but I think I sound short because he may also be the best drug developer that I've worked with in industry as well. But I think it's being exposed to leaders that you can utilize as an example, and then try and mold your leadership capabilities around that. Now, everyone will have a different approach because everyone is different and everyone has a different personality, and everyone, has a different way of approaching that. But I think it's important to have mentors and examples to follow.
Can you think of one of the traits or the examples that James gave you, and one part of his leadership that is specifically notable for you, and how that has shaped how you lead?
Yeah. I can provide an example on it. And for me, it was probably an example of leading through adversity. And so, unfortunately at Ardea, the company was very successful in getting a gout product approved. When that product was approved, though, unfortunately, we were a subsidiary of AstraZeneca, and AstraZeneca decided to pivot in a different direction, out-license the compound, and then close the San Diego site, which does happen oftentimes in San Diego. It's you don't see oftentimes companies that are too long in the tooth here in San Diego. So it's certainly a risk. But I recognize that risk coming to the role, leaving effectively a headquarters situation to basically a subsidiary. But when we got that initial news, the company was devastated. because what had been built there was so unique. It's the most unique situation that I've been involved in my career, and generally people were happy. And I know that James, for example, in that situation was absolutely devastated because he is such a people person, and he was hurting for the entire team. But him being able to step forward and saying, guys, this is not what I wanted to see. This is a difficult situation. It's going to be difficult for everyone, but we're going to come together and we're going to get through this. I think being able to lead and remain positive, and really being able to lead through adversity, that was like the situation where I said, if I ever am in this situation, that's the leader I want to be.
Mm. Mm. And I'm going to go back to another example that you shared. You didn't specifically name it as a leadership example, but your mom. You pointed to her in some very specific ways, words that you didn't even understand at the time. Why are you saying that? How is she an example of leadership for you that has shaped you to who you are today?
Yeah, it's a great question, and so unfortunately, we lost our mom a couple of years ago, but she was a huge influence in us. And if I kind of reflect back on maybe what she did that I'm trying to implement, in my family, is just really being an advocate for that individual. So I have to say, no one ever believed in me more than my mom did, and that gave me the courage to, when I went out into the world, when I would encounter something, when maybe I didn't feel like I was fully confident in a situation, or I had the ability to conquer a situation. I'd reflect back on, say, well, she's pretty cool, and if she believes I can do it, I can do it, right? So that's what I try and do from a family perspective, as well as is support support the family in the same manner. And I think that also reflects into how you can relate to your team. You need to instill in them that you believe in them, that it's a safe space to make mistakes, and if they make mistakes, you're still supporting them, and you're 100% behind them. And I think that kind of brings the team together and makes that team more successful.
Those words that you just reflected on, I believe in you. I don't know that there's a more powerful phrase in the world to say that to someone, however old they are, but to look them in the eye and meaningfully say, I believe in you. I maybe there's a more powerful phrase. I can't think of one.
It's almost like you're, your Kate, right? Because you're going to encounter situations throughout your day, throughout your week, throughout your life, that you're not sure if you can do something, but knowing that someone believes that you can do it, and that's almost your ability to persist forward when you may not believe in yourself. I think that's very powerful.
That's so good. Such a great reminder. Jesse, we're going to end with one more question, but just, wow, thank you so much for bringing your heart to this conversation so far. And the last question is, if you could, in a wave of a wand, seed a conversation in the minds and hearts of every CEO in the life science space, one conversation, maybe not the ultimate one, but just one that they're going to have over the next week, what would that be?
Yeah. So, and maybe we can come back to believe. How are you able to instill in your team that you believe in them? And how are you able to get them to function at that high level where they know that they're functioning in a safe space, and to have the autonomy to make decisions, and and to be able to succeed. So maybe that's the one where we come back to the belief.
I love it. That's great. I hope everyone who's listening takes that one on. Jesse, if folks want to know more about you or connect with you, know more about AltraBio, where can we send them?
Yeah, so you can send them to our website, but I'm also happy to share my email. I really love interacting with people in the life sciences area, and if there's an opportunity where I can help mentor somebody, where someone has mentored me in the past, or help someone advance in their career, I'm happy to do so. So yeah, no, Jeff, I really appreciate you inviting me to participate in this. It's really cool. I've listened to it in the past, and I've always been inspired. And I really appreciate what you're doing for biotech.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's an honor to have you, and we'll put all the information you mentioned. We'll put that in the show notes.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jesse.
Pleasure.